Halo semuanya, kembali lagi di Hybrid Talk dan masih bersama gue Akbar Priyono di sini. Dan ya kemarin tanggal 2 Juni kita sudah melihat ada FPS terbaru besutan dari Riot Games yaitu Valorant baru aja rilis. Dan kalau game ini di luar sana di barat terutama ya mungkin karena close beta di sana gitu kan, antusiasmenya tinggi banget. Dan kalau dilihat-lihat di kita di Indonesia, di Asia Tenggara juga banyak orang yang udah mengantisipasi game yang satu ini nih. Dan ya karena game ini 5v5 FPS kompetitif, mungkin kalian semua udah banyak yang bertanya-tanya nih kayak ini bakal ada e-sportnya nggak nih, bakal ada dukungan nggak nih dari Riot Games dan segala macam. Jadi daripada kita berpanjang-panjang gitu kan, kita langsung aja nih ngobrol sama hari ini dari Hybrid kita udah mengundang tim salah satu perwakilan dari Riot Games. Di sini ada Justin Hulog. Dia adalah General Manager untuk Southeast Asia dan Taiwan dari Riot Games. So, hello Justin.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, how's it going? How about the condition? You are in Singapore, right?
I am in Singapore, yes. Yeah.
How's the condition, the pandemic condition in there?
Well, I haven't left my house in the past 2 months, so that's one thing. But for the most part, I think that things are going pretty well here. Like, it feels like the government really has the situation under control. We're starting to relax a lot of the measures around COVID-19, and slowly but surely, I think we're coming closer and closer to being able to return to normal.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's good to hear. Ya, jadi Justin Hulog ini adalah General Manager Southeast Asia dan Taiwan dari Riot Games. Dia kalau sekira-kira gue yang ngurusin untuk urusan marketing dan segala macamnya di Southeast Asia dan Taiwan. So Justin, maybe you can introduce yourself and maybe you can tell our audience what are you doing at Riot Games.
For sure. So my name is Justin. I'm the general manager of Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. And my day-to-day job is basically working across all of the different teams that work at Riot in order to make sure that we deliver great player experiences for all of our games here within the region. And so that comprises everything from thinking more upstream around the way that we think about developing and integrating different products or different key sort of features into our products to make them more relevant for the market, all the way to like times like this when we've just launched a game, Valorant just launched, for example, in Indonesia, and thinking about how we start delivering that experience directly to players.
Oh, okay. So it's been 2 days Valorant releasing in the market for the player. So far, how's the reception from the Southeast Asian gamers so far?
It's been really, really exciting. So full disclosure, I don't think that I or my team have slept in the past week, just as we've been preparing for launch. That said,
Okay.
it's been really good though, because every moment that I have in my free time, I'm checking the news, I'm checking the press, I'm following streamers on Twitch. I'm looking at what the general player sentiment is, and there's a lot of people that are playing this game, and a lot of people that are super, super excited to try it out. And so it seems like things are going well so far, fingers crossed. So yeah,
Fingers crossed.
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, I've been tried the game, and I'm also see the release that Valorant is giving the bahasa Indonesia for the games. Do you also working for this localization for the games?
Yes. So as I mentioned, that because a lot of my job involves thinking about what are some of the features that we want to integrate into our products, integrating Bahasa Indonesia into Valorant was one of the product decisions that we had made and advocated for early on. And so we're very excited that Valorant is the first game that we have, which is really being positioned in or being translated into Bahasa.
So maybe can you tell a bit about the process of translating the Valorant from English to the Bahasa?
Yeah, so we work with a number of so basically the process starts first with us trying to understand what the potential market is and whether or not our players would actually be excited and interested in playing the game in a given language, in this case, Bahasa, right? And then from there, we work to basically first put the game out in English, and then afterwards start the process of working with translators, whether those are translators that work directly for Riot or whether they're vendors, in order to start basically like localizing it directly into the game language. Right? And so that's essentially the high level of how we think about and start the process.
Okay. Anyway, the translation has been very good as a writer, as a bahasa writer. I really appreciate the translate anyway.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I was really worried.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I think one of the things that's important about launching a game like Valorant and launching any of Riot's games, which tend to be live services games, is that we think very much about co-creating our games with our community. So as we thought about producing the game in Bahasa, we're going to look at feedback from the community. We're going to talk to players like you. We're going to talk to other players throughout Indonesia to figure out ways that we could make that localization and that translation better. So I'm glad to hear that you like it, and I want you to know that we're working to make it as good as possible.
Yeah. The translation is pretty good so far. So the next thing is we're talking about Valorant as a game is I think it's have a pretty good chance to be popular in CM market because of the low specification. Is the mechanic is so familiar, and also it's pretty much easy for the newbie because the basic is for you to properly shoot other players for the Valorant. But I think the game still need to be properly marketed so more people can know the game. Is it? So my question is, what is right plan for the Valorant so Valorant can being more popular in Southeast Asia and also in Indonesia?
Yep. So I think that for this first phase, what we really wanted to do was to make sure that the game was out and that the game was working and that that the game servers itself were all up and running and ready to go. And then I think what we're planning on doing over the next couple of months is really doubling down on the communities that are engaging with the game, including those communities of FPS players within Indonesia, to start figuring out how players want to be supported. And I say that because every community is going to have very different things that people are going to care about, right? So one thing that I know is that in Indonesia and also in the Philippines, where I'm from, PC bangs or iCafes are a really big part of the gaming scene, So what we want to do eventually, right, over time, especially as the COVID situation relaxes, is to start working with those cafes to promote the game in those different venues and areas. There might be other countries where it's more important that we focus on the emerging grassroots esports scene, right? And thinking about how we help local tournaments to develop, how we support people who are in different countries or different cities or far-flung areas to figure out how they can bring those tournaments together. I'm personally from a very small town in the Philippines,
Okay.
and it's often ignored in terms of thinking about like broader partnerships and tournaments. So something that I always think about is how do we make sure that the people that are in my village are able to kind of organize and be able to play together in some kind of competitive organized play. And so, we're watching that over time. I think for now, our focus is on making sure that the service is working, that everyone can log in, that everyone can have the right accounts. And then as we progress over the next couple of months, we're going to ramp up the services and support that we're going to be giving to our players so that everyone can have the experience that they want to have.
Oh wow! So it really means that we in Indonesian is gonna have Riot support from the, let's say, PC Bank partnership and also the grassroots tournament from the Riot. Is it?
I think that what we are exploring those things. There's nothing that's been signed and inked yet, but those are things that we're actively exploring. Obviously, and I'll be really honest with you that if this COVID situation wasn't happening, I would probably be in Indonesia right now, trying to figure out how to kind of push a lot of those things along. But obviously, like, we can't in this environment, But as those restrictions relax, I think we're going to be exploring more and more ways to kind of create that support.
Okay. Maybe we can. Maybe we're gonna talk about this later. But first thing first, maybe you can share a bit about from your perspective, what do you think the biggest challenge to make the games popular in the Indonesian market? Because so far Indonesian market is been pretty much majorly playing on mobile games rather than PC games. What do you
Yeah,
think about that?
I think that the I think that it depends on what you mean by biggest challenge, and I think it depends on what you mean by horizon, you know?
Mm.
So I think for now, for this particular phase of our launch, um, the things that are most important are that we find the players who are most passionate about Valorant, that are going to be the players that will really double down and be able to kind of like um, develop a strong core community of Valorant players, and figure out how to support them. And what I mean by that is that it would probably be one approach for us to do a very, very big launch and to kind of get as many people as possible to play the game. But I think that for this particular phase of where we want to find the people that are most likely to stay with the game in the long term. And I
Mm.
think that that's important because
Mhm.
we at Riot don't design games that we think are going to, close over time. We design games that we want to last for a very, very long time. And
Mm.
because the time in which we think about this is much longer, I would much rather find that the 200 players that are going to be playing every single day, that are going to be super excited about the game, that are going to be strong advocates for it, rather than find people who will play the game for just a couple of months and then eventually churn out. And I think that that's the thing that we're really excited, that I personally am excited about finding.
Mm.
Um, in terms of the broader picture, I can't say a lot right now about it, but we've talked about exploring how Valorant could expand to other platforms, whether that's console or mobile or other things. And while I can't confirm nor deny any of the things that we're doing right now,
Okay.
we are doing those explorations, right? And
Mm.
that I think will be really helpful in terms of understanding how the game will develop in Indonesia.
Mm. Okay. For the talking about the tournament, yeah, you already said that Riot has a plan to support the grassroots tournament in the CA market, also include Indonesia. Uh, but how about the long-term league or maybe the major tournament? There
This,
any
so
plan?
So this is a question that I get asked a lot, and
Yeah.
it's not as, I think, especially because of our success with League of Legends, and especially because of the way that our esports are managed there. There's a lot of expectations for Valorant, and I think I wouldn't be honest if I wasn't saying that I'm hoping that Valorant will become one of the big global esports as well, right?
Mm.
That said, I do think that it's important that first we develop a strong player base and develop a strong group of grassroots players before we make large investments in big, big tournaments, right? And the main reason that I bring that up is because you could throw enormous amounts of prize money at prize pools or enormous
Mm.
amounts of money at tournaments, but if the fundamental scene of the players is not healthy, if you
Mm.
don't have a large group of players that are excited about playing the game, if you don't have a strong set of amateur teams that grow semi-pro that can become pro teams, if you don't have the right coaching structures or the right sort of like underlying things,
Mm.
that big structure that you invest in up front won't be successful. Which is why I think that like what I am really focused on for this year in Southeast Asia is making sure that we have very, very healthy local esports teams, right?
Mm.
And local esports leagues. Because if you have enough of those, that's the thing that then can create a strong semi-pro scene. That's the thing that can create then a strong pro scene. And that's how you make sure that you have not just a big like esports scene, but
Mm.
a sustainable esports scene, which is what I think is really important.
Oh, so it means we gonna see Indonesian Valorant League, let's say, in the future.
I think that what it means is that I want to make sure that Indonesia has a healthy team of local players first. And if
Okay.
that means first that we're going to be and focusing on how we make sure that the local competitive tournament scene is healthy, that's one thing. If it means partnering with iCafes to make sure that there's lots of places where people can play and organize, that might be another thing. And full disclosure, I don't know exactly what that is yet because the game just launched 2 days ago, and some of it is going to be what players tell us. So we have a team right now that's very closely listening to what it is that players are saying, and maybe you'll tell me what it is that we should be doing in order to make sure that that scene is healthy.
I see. So Riot is opening what the feedback from the community in the local Indonesia etc. And also etc. etc.
It's part of why we haven't slept in the past few days.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for the next thing is yeah, you talk also about the IKV and PC Bank, also about the partnering. Uh, so uh, does this mean that we from the local ecosystem can let's say send a proposal to make kind
Yes,
of partnership
absolutely.
for Riot?
Absolutely. I am all ears. Yes, I'm very interested in having those conversations. Yes.
Yeah, because we got the community that already very excited with the Valorant and really want to make this game become more bigger in Indonesia. So does this mean we can just uh, throw the proposal to you guys?
Throw the proposal to me. I am super happy to hear it. Yes.
Okay. For the support, maybe you can tell us a bit what kind of support are you gonna give? What kind of support if the let's say the tournament or maybe what kind of partnership it accepted?
Yeah, I think it's a like I said, I don't have a super concrete set of steps yet. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Precisely because of the fact that we're still in this phase of launching and listening, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that we're really hearing is that people want ways to make organization really easy, self-organization for competitive teams pretty easy, you know. And one of the things that my team is working on right now is a pretty robust plan to figure out how to make it as easy as possible for
Mm-hmm.
people to do that organization. And we're talking to a number of third parties. I can't name anything yet, just because it's not
Okay.
finalized until it's signed, you know.
Yeah.
And I would hate to announce something that isn't ready to announce, you know. But we're talking to a number of partners who potentially could have ways to make that as frictionless and as easy as possible. And so when I say that the kind of support that we're going to give is really dependent on the community feedback, the types of partnerships that I'm searching for and the types of partnerships that I'm most interested in are ones that directly respond to problems that the community brings up, you know. So I think that's kind of the way that we're thinking about this over time.
Okay. Uh, Now talking about the games, Valorant so far is been most player is comparison it with the CS:GO. Me also from our community in Indonesia, most of the pros from the CS:GO, the caster, the some of the team owners, CS:GO team owners also talk that yeah, Valorant is pretty much like kind of what how do you say like the light version of the CS:GO. Yeah, some people saying of that, and some people also say that Valorant is pretty much not as good as CS:GO. But from your opinion, what do you think about this kind of opinion that been flying?
I think that there's a lot of thought that went into Valorant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of we've been testing this game out for a number of years now. And what I would say are some of the things are that we thought about when we were creating this game was to think about the things that really worked in a lot of major FPS games. And then also think about fixing some of the biggest problems that happen in the games, right? So things that I think are really important to call out, which I think my friends on the dev team always talk about. How do you think about things like poor hit registration, right? And how do you think about things like solving peeker's advantage? How do you think about making sure that your anti-cheat is really strong to ensure that there's strong competitive integrity in the game? How do you make sure that you're making the right investments in infrastructure all around the world so that a player in Indonesia has the same advantage as a player in Japan or a player in Europe, right? And then I think that the other thing that I think is really cool about Valorant, and one of the things, frankly, that I think people should really explore is the abilities. Because what I love about Valorant is that, yes, it is a it is a game that rewards extremely high skill,
Mhm.
but the abilities actually give you an enormous amount of flexibility to be creative in the game. And I was actually just watching a number of Thai streamers just before this call to kind of see some of the stuff that they're doing. And in
Mhm.
2 days, it's crazy to me how they were able to kind of take the combination of abilities, like use Omen to kind of like jump around the map and figure out how
Mhm.
exactly how to get Sage to kind of like correct a lot of the problems that are happening, and how um, they just did things that like I said, I've been watching the devs play this game for like a year and a half, you know.
Mhm.
And in 2 days, these players are suddenly able to come up with very, very creative ways uh, to protect the spike and like kill other players
Yeah.
that just because of the amount that's happening in those abilities. And as we
Mhm.
add more and more agents, that
Mhm.
kind of flashy play makes Valorant a very, very exciting game to watch, I think, you know.
Mhm.
So my answer to the question is that for those folks that are still doubt Valorant's like integrity,
Mhm.
I encourage them to spend more time like really exploring that, because I think that they'll be really surprised by
Mhm.
just how exciting the game can be and how creative you can be in the game.
Okay. Now also talking about another localization because the Valorant already had bahasa Indonesia, and also from what I see, Valorant got the country-based agents because we see Jet come from the South Korea and the Phoenix come, let's say, from United States. So is there any chance we can see Indonesian agent, let's say, for the Valorant?
There is there is always a chance, and we are always discussing it, but I cannot confirm nor deny what the definite plans
Ah,
are.
okay then. uh, and also for the partnership, uh, do do the streamers and content creator and do Riot also have some kind of partnership with the local Indonesian streamers and content creator for this for Valorant?
So we are. So there's a couple of answers to that. The short story is yes. The long
Mhm.
answer is that we're making a number of investments into the Indonesian community. So for those of folks that are on the site, they'll see that we're hiring for a couple of roles specifically focused on Indonesia. One of the biggest ones that we're looking at right now is a community lead for the Indonesian team who will work most
Mhm.
closely with folks in Indonesia and influencers to actually sort of help to guide and drive that community. And so, our goal first is to make sure that we staff up our team appropriately with all the right folks so that we can actually
Mhm.
help and work with that community most closely. So, you know, I think that's one of the places where I personally am really, really excited to make investments. And like I said, if we were able to travel, I probably would be there right now, helping to onboard
Mhm.
that person and get them up and running.
Mm. So it means we for the streamers, for the content creator, is it has a chance to be Riot partner if they, let's say, streaming more Valorant or maybe make content about Valorant.
Oh, absolutely.
So next thing is about in before I'm seeing the article in the ESPN that said Riot has been working pretty closely with the esport organization when the closed beta phase is running. So, do you also do it for the local CM market? Do you also talk with the local Indonesian esport organization or maybe from another country in South Asia for the how to make Valorant better in the South Asia and also in Indonesia?
Yes, and without naming specific names,
Mm-hmm.
the answer is yes. In both ASEAN as a whole, both Southeast Asia as a whole, um, as well as in Indonesia proper, right? And I think that Valorant is one of our games that's coming out. We have other games that are also going to come out over the course of the year, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are excited about those. And so we've also been talking to quite a variety of people. And it's not just folks in the esports side, it's also folks on the government side, right? Because we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
more and more people in governments who are really, really excited to figure out how we can help and promote esports in a way that's positive for the youth and for the community and for our players.
Mm. Okay, so maybe this is gonna be the last thing for the question. So yeah, from what your explanation, I think Indonesian player can be more anticipate Valorant more, can be more excited about the Valorant because you already state that the Riot crew gonna be supporting the game for the Asia market and also for the Indonesia market. Maybe you can sum up a bit about what do you gonna plan for the Asia market and the Indonesia market also for the Valorant.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, the thing that we're really, really excited about is making sure that we support and help our most excited Valorant players in Indonesia and in the rest of C to have a strong and healthy ecosystem. And the ways that we're thinking about doing that are, one, by making sure that we're rewarding the strongest content creators and influencers. Two, by really, really thinking about how we create the right strategic partnerships and figuring out how we help folks like iCafes and esports owners and people within the ecosystem to be able to spread the game. And then three, really starting to make strong investments in competitive grassroots play. And with the goal of eventually making Valorant much, much larger. And then, of course, one of the other big things that we're looking at is starting to figure out how we can start making investments in other platforms, right? And we're doing those active explorations now around mobile, around console, and around a lot of other things.
So Valorant Mobile is real, is it?
No, I didn't confirm. I'm just saying we're really, really excited about it. So and it's one of the things we're exploring.
Okay then, thank you so much, Justin. I think that's all my question about the Valorant release and also the plan from Riot to make Valorant can more accepted in share market.
Sweet, great. Thank you so much. Thanks for the time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Terima kasih. Bye bye.
Ya, jadi itu dia tadi obrolan kita sama Justin Hulog, ngobrolin soal gimana nih Riot rencananya buat ngegedein Valorant di Indonesia, bakal ada e-sport atau enggak dan segala macamnya. Buat kalian yang suka sama konten ini, jangan lupa buat like and share buat supaya lebih banyak orang tahu nih soal bahwa gimana rencananya Riot untuk Valorant, dan juga jangan lupa buat subscribe karena kita bakal ada konten-konten lainnya juga seputar e-sports tentunya dari Hybrid Talk dan juga Hybrid Gaming Chill Session. Dan I think that's all. Terima kasih buat kalian yang sudah nonton. Sampai bertemu di Hybrid Talk berikutnya. Justin, say sampai bertemu.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sampai bertemu. Dadah.